Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last panel sessions of today. My name is Zinat Ladak, and I am a CSPC volunteer with the program committee. We're about to participate in an interactive panel titled Rebooting the Social Impact Mandate of Universities, and this panel is hosted by the Collaborative. I'd like to remind everyone that you can tweet using the hashtag CSPC2022 at Science Policy. As well, there is a survey, an evaluation survey on the app for every panel throughout the conference. Please fill out these surveys so that we can improve and enhance our conferences and events for the future. For this panel, we won't be using the app for Q&A. We're going to focus on vocal questions, and so there will be a mic kind of going around the room towards the end. And now I will hand it over to Sandra Lapointe.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I realize that we're the only thing standing between now and drinks. So we will make it interesting. First thing I'd like to do is to do a land acknowledgement. I realize that we're here on the traditional territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nations, but I'm myself from Hamilton, Ontario, and that's the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Mississauga people. It's the territory that's also covered by the Dish with One Spoon agreement. And it's rare that I travel in the region and end up in a traditional territory that's not part of the Haudenosaunee Confederation. So it's sort of special. I want to first thank the organizers of CSPC for the very generous invitation. There's a reason why we're here, and it's because we have been working with CSPC around this event, and I'll say a little bit more about that. Before I go on, and I will go on a little bit, I even prepared speaking notes, which is something I don't often do. I'm going to ask each of my speakers to introduce themselves because I think they are the best positioned to introduce themselves, and they all do amazing things that I'm able to do justice to. So I'm going to start with Tricia. Do you want to take your microphone? Should work. It's just going to turn on.
Magic?
Yes.
Okay. That's magic. It's social innovation. Right here. So hi, everyone. I'm Tricia Williams. I'm the Director of Research, Evaluation, and Knowledge Mobilization, long job title, at the Future Skills Center, which is a research and innovation center based out of Toronto Metropolitan University, focused on equipping Canadians with the skills and opportunities that they need to thrive in the future of work.
Hello, everyone. I'm Coriel Buffy. I'm Senior Director for Society and Culture at Excelis. And for those of you who don't know Excelis, which I would presume is the majority of you, we're a tech transfer organization for the whole province of Quebec. So all universities in Quebec, all colleges, and all publicly funded research institutions and hospitals as well. So I concentrate not on the tech transfer, but on the value transfer. So I hope that at some point we're able to change the first T with a V. So value transfer organization.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Nempton. I'm the CEO at Social Innovation Canada. We're a national organization working to apply social innovation principles and practices to some of our national complex challenges.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Abid Jan. I'm the Director of Capacity Building at United Way here in Ottawa, but we work across the region, East Ontario region. And before that, I was working with the city of Ottawa, so I'm bringing the experience of working from the municipal side of things to the community services side of things, working in collaboration with the academic institutions. Thank you.
All of my speakers today were also participants at the first inaugural installment of the Canadian Forum on Innovation and Societal Impact that was held at McMaster University just a month ago. And I see many faces I recognize. Raise your hand if you were at the forum last month. A few people. It was by invitation only, so that might explain why you weren't there. So let me tell you a little bit about the Canadian Forum on Innovation and Societal Impact, because this pit stop here is the first step in a series of re-engagement activities that we hope to be conducting with our partners. So the forum convened 125 participants for a series of, and we called them catalyst roundtables, and they had a fishbowl format. Really, what we were trying to create is the space for deliberative dialogues and consultations. So it was very workshopy. That happened at McMaster on the 12th and 13th of October. I like to think about the forum as an ongoing joint venture with the Canadian Science Policy Centre. They were this was a partnership between CSPC and the collaborative, and with the specific aim of convening social research and innovation stakeholders across sectors. So in academia, but also in the social sector, in the municipal sector, because there are innovation stakeholders across all those sectors, right? The first edition of the forum, the inaugural meeting, the purpose was to create the beginning of an alignment on policies and practices that foster innovation and build capacity in the social and municipal sector for innovation. And our focus was really going to be around impact-first training and knowledge mobilization practices. Again, the focus is human and social research. The assumption being that those are the human and social research is an important aspect of innovation in the social sector. And specifically, and this is where it gets interesting, we wanted to understand how university can better utilize and mobilize social and human research and knowledge into the communities, in particular into social sector organization. And we were sort of like a little bit deliberately excluding health, because we think that there's a lot that already is being done around health, less around social services, less around municipal government. So we were thinking not-for-profit charities, funders, and of course municipal government, because that's the social ecosystem, right? You can call it the municipal ecosystem, you can call it the social ecosystem. There's a lot of overlap between the two. It was a genuinely cross-sectoral setting, and it was intended to provide an opportunity to learn from a variety of perspectives. And so it was very well curated. The reason why we went by invitation only is because we wanted to create an environment where we could hear all the voices across sectors. So who were the participants? Well, there were social sector organizations, of course, leaders. So, and here I'm thinking community impact and capacity building and research directors from within the United Way network across the country, so coast to coast. We had organizations like Imagine Canada, the Ontario Nonprofit Network, Community Foundations of Canada, Pillar Not-for-Profit, and of course, ABID was one of the voices in that sector. We had social innovation stakeholders. I think this is a very broad category. That includes practitioners and funders like the McConnell Foundation, the Canadian Housing Corporation, and leaders like Andrea Nemtin, who's the CEO of Social Innovation Canada. And then, of course, we had research and higher education policy stakeholders, and we really wanted to have them at the table listening and also speaking, but also listening. So SHRC, NSERC, Universities Canada, Magnet, CFAR, MyTax, Genome Canada, and chief science advisors from both the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Agriculture Canada. And there's a reason why they were there, is because they are doing things that have to do with innovation, the social sector, that are very interesting. And of course, one of our partners, le Fonds québécois, le Fonds de recherche du Québec, Société et Culture. And we included also in that category practitioners in the knowledge mobilization space. So we had an entire delegation from Research Impact Canada, and we had Coriel Buffy, who actually is leading the effort around society and culture in Quebec, working with the government on as part of his role in Axelis. And finally, we had, of course, decision and policymaker from the municipal government. So we had the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that was there, and some people who work in cities, administrative level, not political. There were elections in Ontario, so it was not a good time to bring politicians into discussions. Finally, social and human researchers, and including many Indigenous colleagues whose perspective were very welcome. So the whole idea was to get to the point where we could begin to think about a concerted action and research plan. So the event was really intended as a consultation and consultation. I want to tell you a little bit about the format because it was very different. I want you to understand the extent to which we went to facilitate deliberative dialogue. So we had 4 half days, were sandwiches of workshops. Each half day started with a catalyst roundtable, after which we broke out into 3 different workshops, over the course of which participants were guided by 12 facilitators through a consultative process that was designed for deliberation. In each workshop, we suggested 6 to 8 questions on the topic, and the participants selected the 4 questions that they wanted to answer through a democratic process. I think it was mostly democratic, I hope. We set up workstations for each selected questions. We divided the group, and then we had 15 minutes rotations to get everyone to think about all the questions. And in all, the participants deliberated around 42 questions, or organized around 4 main themes. And these themes were the nature and structure of innovation, especially in the social sector, campus community relationships, and the challenges of knowledge mobilization in the social innovation ecosystem, the role of municipal government in fostering innovation in the social space, and the needs we have around skills and talent if we want to create a culture of innovation in the social sector. There's also a 5th transversal theme that was about integrating indigenous knowledge and decolonial perspective as part of our reflections. Now, we have produced an analytic summary of the discussion, which we will be using as a basis for the next step. So we're thinking about creating a consensus workbook and making it available for everyone as part of furthering the consultation. But we also want to start thinking about an action and research plan. So what I've done is I've shared in advance of the panel this analytic summary. We just, the event was a month ago, so we were able to turn everything in a month. I've shared the analytic summary with our panelists, and I have asked each of them to share with us their recommendation as a way to maybe, as a proposition to you, maybe to hear from your perspective on where we want to go or to answer any of the questions. And I'm really curious to know what they are going to tell me about. The way this is going to go, we want this to be very dynamic. So we're going to have 2 panelists tell us about what they think, and then have a little bit of a table discussion around this because we were all there and we probably have questions of clarification. Another 2 panelists, and then a little bit more table discussion, but I'd like to open it to discussion. And my assistant, who was one of those very dedicated facilitator who made all these people talk about the things that matter, will be there to help you with a microphone. All right. So why don't we start with you, Coriel? As we planned. It's not a question.
I was hoping it would change, but no, it's okay. I'm willing to go first. I'm going to start with just talking a bit about Excelis to just situate it globally. So who here comes from social sciences? Well, humanities, arts, and literature. Okay, about half the room. Okay, excellent. So half the room doesn't know about tech transfer offices. So I'm just kidding. So tech transfer offices is basically for the STEM or for the other sciences. It's a way to valorize the research results of their initiatives. Usually it goes around protecting IP and then trying to license it to some company. And usually people, when they hear about this in the social sciences, they cringe because they don't necessarily want to go into valorization mode because it has traditionally been about economic valorization of their research outputs. Excelis has been created to challenge that assumption. So we want to promote the societal benefits that stems from research. For the Quebec government, it's a simple calculus. It's about trying to increase the return on investment from their investments in research. And that return on investment can be, yes, economic, but it can also be social, environmental, cultural, and other types of returns. So I've been tasked into implementing this at Excelis. So starting with the valorization of SHS and arts and literature as well. One of the themes that was discovered as part of this 4 half days of discussion was unlocking the contribution of all sectors. This is not happening right now with SHS. It's happening at the research level, but it's not necessarily permeating in the real world. So I think we need to do a better job at taking the research results and bringing them into society. I know that for you for the social sector people or for the social sciences people, it's part of the grant application process usually to have some partner and to see how you're doing knowledge transfer, knowledge mobilization. But I think it's important to go a step further and seeing how to implement these research results. There are quite a few hurdles to do that currently, so it's not necessarily valorized in the academic world. So we need to work on this. And I know that I see my colleagues from the FRQ right now, and they're thinking about how to incentivize different areas. Andorra is thinking about how to incentivize academic work and going a bit further. And I think there are also incentives for research. I could go on and on about this, but one of the areas that we see is we very often see innovation as a very linear process, going from research to society. And we've seen that once you do that, society actually is also a shifting ground. So society has additional questions that can then be translated into further research questions. And this provides an opportunity to the academics out there as well. So we're really seeing this as a not just as a linear process, but more as an infinite loop of research, knowledge utilization, and then going back into research as well. If we're talking about the overall landscape of research funding in the province, and my colleagues from the FRQ will know this, 50% of the research funding goes to health, or the equivalent of CIHR, the FRQ-S in Quebec. 24 point something goes to FRQ-NT, Natural Sciences and Technology, so the equivalent of NSERC. And 25 point something percent goes into FRQ-SA, Society and Culture, so the equivalent of SHIRC at the federal level. Meaning that there's slightly, less than half a percent of difference, but there's actually a lot of funding going to SHS in terms of research funding. But once you go past the research funding into innovation, then what do we see in terms of global funding mechanisms? It goes a lot for tech transfer and tech innovation and working on a prototype and bringing that prototype to market. But we don't have a similar pathway for social sciences, humanities, arts and literature. So we need to create that process. We need to create that narrative, because right now we're basically foregoing 25% of our investment in research. So that's what Excelis tries to do. So unlocking the contribution of all sectors, what we do is we try to see where the value of the research is. Sometimes there's social value, sometimes there's environmental value. We try to qualify it, quantify it, and see if it's worth for Excelis, for the university, for the government generally to invest additional resources into doing the iterative process that's needed for innovation to happen. And again, innovation meaning as implementation or scale up. Sometimes it's implementation, sometimes it's scaling up something that's already been done in a certain community. I think I'll stop it for now. And then the first part is evaluation. And then the second part, of course, is actually doing it and doing everything that we can to make it happen. Finding funding, finding partners, finding a business model, and finding a nonprofit model, finding all the models that are possible to try to unleash the value that's presented before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Coriel. I'm not going to jump in because I need to let Andrea say something first. Is this even on? It's not. Is it on? We don't know. Andrea.
Thank you. So I just want to say yes and, right? And so working in social innovation, a lot of my work is with social entrepreneurs. It's with national labs on big, really some of our society's biggest challenges are affordable housing, mental health, food security. These are really, really pressing issues. And I've been thinking a lot and looking a lot at how innovation is funded and about how it's all going to much of it. There's obviously some work being done in housing and some being doing in climate change. And there's very little funding for social innovation. Very little of it's going to social. And then I start to look at, so what do we actually need to create innovation on these big complex challenges? And it's the innovation approach, right? We need research to inform. But research is really an enabler. Universities are enablers of innovation. Innovation actually happens at the firm and at the community level, and hopefully driven by necessity rather than invention. And so I think that beyond just the prototyping, I have to agree, getting into piloting, component innovation, and then the actual scaling. And I think you can apply all of these phases to innovation to social challenges just as you can to tech innovation and product innovation. And this is a piece of work that, if you were going to say, what do we need to do? I think we need to do this. We need to actually look and map these two. We have a swirl in social innovation that starts with sort of ideation and goes up through, it's the same process. Testing our assumptions, hypothesis, testing our assumptions. We do it through a lab, incubation, acceleration approaches, and then it gets stuck. It gets stuck in prototype, and if you're a nonprofit, not a real sexy tech company, it's even worse, right? They just think, that's nice, dear. That's sort of how they approach. And so it's the only funding folks can get right now is through, there's the social finance fund. It's got a tiny bit of it is going towards this sort of actual field building. Philanthropy is doing a little bit of it if you can make a huge, quite a big case for it. In the social innovation sector, one of the harder parts, adding to this, is there's very little collaboration with universities. Universities and the resources, the actual rigor is so crucial, right? All of that research, if you've got a nonprofit or a community group, they kind of know what the problem is because they're living it, but they can't actually verify it. And so if the academic institutions can come in and do some verification, say, yes, this actually is a challenge, and maybe do the systems mapping. See, it's a challenge not because of this, but actually there's this whole system that's going on that's actually creating a problem. Then we can start to make really informed changes instead of kind of shots in the dark and lobby requests, right? And so this is what I've seen happen actually in some of the work we've done. We did quite a large lab on the financialization of housing. Financialization of housing and housing affordability is very complicated, right? It goes from monetary policy down to rental rates. It's immigration. It's, CMHC. And so we had to first map that entire system. And we used, academic rigor for that. We needed academic rigor to be able to model things out. And then we needed the lived experience. Because when it's just information and you're not actually speaking to the people that can't find a home that meets their needs, and there's millions of them in Canada, you don't actually understand how important it is. So I just want to say yes, and. Yes, and we need to work together, the multi-sector approach, that academia actually has a lot to learn from community as well. And if we can find hypotheses in community to verify in academia and then work together to develop solutions that can move beyond prototyping, I'm really excited about that.
I don't know if I'm going to get my tech person to... Is my microphone on? Yeah, good. Okay, I can't hear it. What I'm hearing, I of course I love what you both say, but what I'm hearing... It's not on, Sandra. It's not on? It's on, okay. I will hold it closer to my mouth. It's very close, like I can't touch it. What I'm hearing, and I think it's an important thing, is you're saying, and I'm going to start with you, Andrea. You're saying, sure, research needs to be part of the process, but innovation is a different thing. Research is an ingredient. And if we're thinking about partnerships with the university, we have to be clear that a research partnership is a different thing than an innovation partnership. There's something that is involved in innovation that needs to be driven from the community and involves processes such as systems mapping, stakeholder mapping, design thinking that academics may not be super comfortable with, but where academic rigor is absolutely crucial. So that's a very different kind of partnership. I'm hoping somebody from SHARC is here because it's a very important, they have such a role in incentivizing the kind of research and the kind of community or knowledge-driven partnerships that social science and humanities can do. So please.
Yeah. So, I'm actually been really inspired by Dan Bresnitz's recent book on innovation in real places. And he talks a lot about these phases of innovation and applies a growth model. And he says, the enablers to innovation, and there's different variations of the amount of these three factors at each different phase, are private-public spaces, universities, where we work together on this research. Solid ecosystem building. So you actually have to build the ecosystem around the issue and around and the capacities, and then enabling policy. And if you can sort of pull those different factors together in sort of the right combination to a challenge, and then move it past prototyping, then you can start to see some systems change.
I'm opening this on the table. I don't know, Abid or Trisha, if you'd like to say something already.
I'm allowed?
Yes, you
are. All right. I have so many thoughts about this. I couldn't agree more. I heard about implementation, piloting. We have 200 projects right now at Future Skills Center and piloting different things around skills innovation all across the country. 40% of our projects are either employer-led or employer-partnered, which is a bit rare in the skills space, right? So we've put out kind of funding especially to do that. What I'm going to say, though, is, I was thinking, you need some sort of individual skills around this, capacities. We talked about that in the forum. I'm linking back to the forum, Sandra. We also need, the relationships and the networks and the ecosystem. But really, I think at its heart, one of the things that struck me in doing this work at FSC is that we also have to say that failure is an option. Otherwise, it isn't innovation. There has to be some element of risk. And I tell you right now, I've got, and not pointing the finger at any project partners, some of whom are in the room, but I've got 200 project partners who want to say my project was a success. Everyone wants to be successful, and for very good reason, because the funding requires you to be successful. Nobody wants to fail. So I think we have a very low tolerance for failure, especially in social innovation. And until we get at that root of like that culture of evaluation, that testing, probing, looking at evidence, looking at the data to see what the outcomes are, and saying that that doesn't mean that your organization is bad or this project failed if an intervention doesn't work the way you want it to. But right now, there is so little tolerance for that. So go for it.
Sandra, can I ask a question? So the question is that what I'm hearing from Coriel is kind of music to my ears, and that's happening in Quebec, right? Of course, I wish this thing was happening in Ontario. I just want to confirm that integration that you're talking about, integration of research into that. So is it happening that I don't know, or is it in the making?
Gabriel, do you want to say something about that?
I'm not answering for Ontario. But what I can say is we still have long ways to go. Okay, so it's been officially launched last year, year and a half. I was hired over a year ago. I was hired a year ago with that mandate. So we still have a long way to go. What I think we also need to do is shift the culture, because it's also about culture. You were mentioning research. Do we approach a partnership on the research side, or do we approach it on the innovation side? And I think there was mention earlier this morning, I don't know who on the panel was talking about Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe, when you see the financing, the overall research and innovation framework, they put half of their budget on the research aspect and half of their budget on solving societal challenges. We can do the same thing in Canada. We can do the same thing in the province as well. And we need to build the ecosystem of specialized knowledge. That's the traditional academic knowledge in different fields. We need to encourage collaborations. So we need to invest in the basic research level, but we also need to provide incentives for people to assemble themselves. So I'm very often thinking of Legos. So the disciplines are the Legos, the individual blocks. And sometimes you need to assemble different things. And you put some of the pieces together. Once it's over, you solve the challenge, economic, social, name the challenge. Then they can back to do more research at the basic level, and you have this wheel turning over. So I think this is what in Dan's book, because I've started reading Dan's book because I was really interested in his ideas. He mentions the ability to scale up and down, and then attack a problem. And basically, what the speakers this morning were talking about when they needed to challenge a pandemic. We need rapid scale of a system. And I think if we're coming up with these innovation processes that allow for research to be mobilized with different actors and then still fund their basic research, we'll be solving a problem. And also, to even go further, what we were talking about, alternate facts or fake news, I think this is a systemic risk that research faces. If we don't provide impact or stories about the impact of research, if I were an elected official, I need to choose where I put my budget. Mm-hmm. If I don't have the support for the investment in research because people think it's actually useful, then we might have a tougher time justifying the basic research funding. So I also see that as addressing a systemic risk.
And I want to, so we're talking a lot about Dan Bresnitz. He was the keynote at the conference, but it's important to mention that because social innovation, it's a buzzword, it's a fuzzword, what is it? So we needed to be very clear about what it was that we were trying to do. And our approach was really to think, okay, so what is innovation in any sector? And what does innovation in the social sector need to look like? What do we need to create the conditions in which we can talk about an innovation ecosystem? And we wanted to have a model of innovation that was, a plausible model, an effective model. And I think that we all agreed that Dan's book, Innovation in Real Places, provides a framework that is that is groundbreaking, not only for us, but I think for innovation in any space, right? But it's also very conversant with with what actually is happening in the social sector and how we need to foster innovation in the social sector. So social innovation is not a sui generis thing. It's part of what innovation of the innovation policy that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to come back on your question also, Abid, because you're asking me, like, is it happening? And what I can say is that everyone is very eager to be able to make a commitment in universities, is very eager to make a commitment to social innovation, to innovation in the social sector. But it's hard to know how. And part of the reason has to do with the fact that academic culture revolves around research, and that research revolves around, and especially in the social science and humanities, around research programs that are led by individuals who already know what the questions are, and they already know what the problems are. And it's very hard for them to think about how to sort of shift and start working on a process that is going to include start with co-design of the research question itself. And it's happening more and more, and there are people who are doing amazing work, especially I'm thinking of Naomi Nichols at Trent, who is building a community lab. And I wish that every university would be thinking about that. But again, I think it's also really important to think about the role of research in the innovation space in the social sector and not put all our eggs in that basket, because other baskets are going to be empty.
Mm-hmm. Can I just build on that for a second? Because to me, the difference between traditional innovation and social innovation is that traditional innovation generally is evaluated on its capacity to create jobs and have economic growth. And the idea is that then social and environmental outcomes will ensue. And social innovation just flips this and looks at addressing a social or an environmental challenge first, so that then we will have a more prosperous economy for all. And when you look at those, that little flip makes it quite different in terms of the relationship with the business model, right? So if you're building something that's going to make money, be commercialized and create profit, then the for-profit company will partner with the university, and it will be subsidized, but it will pay some money, and then eventually it will earn lots of dough. Well, the nonprofit the difference with the social is the goal is the impact. So it's a nonprofit organization that isn't going to get lots of money when they create lots of impact, but the world's going to be better. And so we actually need, it's actually sort of government, I think, whose job it is to fill that gap when the impact is the goal. Now, if money's all going towards the commercialization piece and not towards the impact, we have a little bit of a structural challenge. Not that I'm self-interested.
I love that so much. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, the climate change challenge. And I went to the panel this morning, which was a great panel. But anytime you go to climate events, or what you hear the announcements about is investment in the infrastructure, in the science, the tech, the R&D. It's good. We need that. We absolutely need it. It's going to be critical. But we know also that, there's going to be huge labor dimensions, transitions. And other than kind of hearing just transitions, we haven't seen a lot of kind of viable solutions. We're prototyping some, thinking about how to get to scale, right? It is possible, but how are people going to retrain for jobs? How are we going to have also the labor force that we need to kind of meet the challenge of that future? And we've seen much less investment and even discussion about what's involved on that kind of social innovation.
Can I jump in? I want to say something because I love this, of course, but there's something really, there's a way to frame this that just piggyback rides on what you were saying. So when we invited Dan Bresnet, and this was an initiative from Andrea and I, we were excited because he just won the donor prize. and for innovation. And I looked at the short list, and there was this other book by a guy called Mark Carney on values, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to read this too. And there is something that Carney, who is a former governor of the Bank of Canada, of the Bank of England, and I don't know where he's going, but he's a smart cookie, I like to say. He proposes this distinction. He says, well, we need a market economy. We need to be able to, and there's a process for innovation in the market economy that's absolutely crucial that it be, structured the way it is. But in order to have a market economy in the first place, you have to have the kind of social stability that is going to generate the trust and the relationship that is going to sustain the values that underpin, or our understanding of the values that underpin the market economy. And we need innovation for that as well, because trust is hard to build, and it requires us to be able to cater to the needs of our communities. But the innovation process needs to be different, because it's no longer something that works on the basis of market values. It's something that requires us to think in terms of social values. And it's very important. It's not that innovation is different, but it's that the workings of it, the environment of it, rests on different kinds of values, and it's okay, and they overlap, and they're both needed, but we need to be able to make the difference between the two.
I just wanted to touch on this because this is a subject that's quite dear to me, having been involved in setting up international organizations in the climate change sector. And and this, I think, is a lesson as well for academia. As you can obviously tell, I don't come from academia. There is the way that we also communicate, the codified knowledge. And I was debating with some of the IPCC chairs. Who except you reads your IPCC report when it comes out? So who knows here? Who here knows about the IPCC? Okay, so that's a good number. That's a good number. So it's basically the report that feeds the summary of science on climate change. So it's a gathering of all the data that comes from these global science research programs that is fed to governmental stakeholders so that they're able to take decisions on climate. Not a lot of people read that report. And then we expect people to just look at a report codified in writing, and in a lot of places people don't write. Don't write or read. So how do you want to affect change and climate change using the traditional methods of research? So we need to come up with other methods to intervene on the values you were talking about, and Mark Carney did quite well. I think that a lot of these answers come from social sciences, humanities, and even arts. So again, Greta Thunberg probably did more to change the values than a lot of these reports. The documentary on climate change that happened 10 years ago, Al Gore's documentary, probably did more in filmography, like through a documentary, than a lot of the IPCC reports. And the students that come in your universities, they're motivated by this impact. So it's very important that we're able to harness what students want when they get inside universities. That's also how universities get funding, by the way, so that they're able to apply it and listen to the methods that they have to communicate values and research from social sciences.
This is something that was said, and I can't remember who said it, but, kids get it. Students arrive at university, they want to change the world, and we convince them not to, which is a little bit sad. So, but I see, Abid, that you're thinking very deeply, and it's almost your time to speak too. Would you like to jump into the conversation, or would you like to?
I'm loud enough, probably. I was just thinking that this is kind of a segue into what I was thinking. Particularly from the social services sector. So, I've been working with United Way for the past 12 years, and before that with the municipality here locally. But honestly, all that you're talking about, and this talk about social innovation in particular, right? So I don't know if I'm wrong, wherever you're coming from, Hamilton? Hmm? You're based in Hamilton?
I'm based in Toronto, but we're national.
All right.
Our teams
okay,
across the country.
So I'll just speak to to what I observe here in Ottawa, and I'll just speak from that perspective. And I just quickly Googled our website, United Way's website, and there are references to social innovation, but this kind of, it's mixed with the social enterprise, right? So wherever there's a reference to social innovation, that's social, they actually kind of, it's just go hand in hand. Back in 2011, 2012, we came up with the Social Innovation Fund. And the reason that we came up with the Social Innovation Fund was not that we understood the concept of social innovation, but the Social Innovation Fund was because we were funding initiatives which are tried and tested and what we call evidence-based, right? So we were funding only those initiatives which were evidence-based. And then somebody mentioned at the board level that there are other organizations which are coming up with some new ideas. So how can we fund those new initiatives? So the Innovation Fund was established for new initiatives, but despite that, people were not taking risk because as a social service agency, how would I take a risk on some new idea? Forget about social innovation, just new idea. So how would I take a risk on applying for a new idea, whereas I know that the funder doesn't have social innovation as a priority? So if you go on United Way's website, even today, this is like, I'm talking about 12 years later, still social innovation is not one of the, what we call it, critical priorities, right? So it's not one of the critical priorities. I'm not just talking about just United Way, but any other funder locally here. So the result of that is that there is extremely low understanding about social innovation in the sector, right? That's one. The other thing is that when we talk about the relationship between the university, the campus and community relationship, right? It's not just related to to this field of social innovation. That's a culture in the academic culture, right? The way the culture is, there needs to be a shift in the culture because that affects not social innovation, but other relationships and other partnerships as well. So I'll just give you a quick couple of examples. Funding is one factor, right? That there's not enough funding, neither from the research side, nor from the social work that we do from our side. So there's not enough funding for that collaboration and collaborative work. But the other thing is that I'll just quick examples about the funding aspect of it. So we started an initiative that was a place-based initiative here in Ottawa, and we tried to engage researchers so that they could bring in research and help us explore things and do some analysis of the issues. So we created a table that was called Knowledge Transfer Table, right? So now we have folks from Ottawa U, Carleton, and other institutions. So Knowledge Transfer Table. At the same time, Ottawa U came up with an initiative that's also place-based data analysis and mapping system. So that's called ONS, Ottawa Neighborhood Study. So today, and both of them came around at the same time, 2009, and now it's 2022. The ONS survives because we are investing about $100,000 a year in that particular initiative. So that partnership with Ottawa U, that's thriving. Whereas the other initiative, the Knowledge Transfer Table, it just survived for about a year or two. And then it fizzled out. And the reason for that was that neither the university was interested in investing in that particular initiative, nor the social service sector, not the municipality at that time. So the thing is that one of the things, the forum that we attended at McMaster, that was perfect from my understanding because I had several thoughts, but I was never able to hear the same thoughts from others. So that was kind of a unanimous, there was a consensus on a few things, right? So I'll just mention a few of them. So one of them was that we need to mainstream this concept of social innovation. So in our sector here in Ottawa, I'll just speak in terms of Ottawa, right? So there is very limited understanding of social innovation. But if you compare that to, for instance, collective impact, right? So 2011, Stanford came up with this approach of collective impact. But what they did was, like within a year, everyone was talking about collective impact. Everyone was adopting the approach of collective impact. And the only reason, not the only reason, but the few reasons, one, they put the concept of collective impact very crisp and clear with the help of stories and with the help of conditions and preconditions and all those kinds of things. And people got it. And people got it how? People clearly understood it, that, look, we are going to adopt the collective impact approach, but that's going to help us in the issue of homelessness, on the issue of poverty, on the issue of community safety, etc. Pick up any issue, but this thing is going to help you, right? So that mainstreaming of that idea of collective impact worked there, right? A very quick example of another initiative, results-based accountability. A simple concept. We brought Mark Friedman from US. He had just one-day session, right? So you don't need that complex approaches to mainstream an idea in our sector in particular, social services sector. So there was just one-day event, and he spoke about the value of results-based accountability. And that day, that was 2014, and this day, people are, regardless of the collective impact, regardless of all the other approaches, they are sticking to that approach of results-based accountability in their work. So one, we need to mainstream this approach of this concept of social innovation in the social service sector. And then we need to engage people from academia in our work. Like, for instance, we have collaborations, we have partnerships, we have coalitions around all these issues, whether it's homelessness or food security, you just name it, right? So in the sector, there are always those types of collaborations and coalitions. So if there is enough incentive for the researchers, right, and if there is enough support to the researchers from the universities, and there, or if there is a structured system at the academic institutions, where you can go and be part of those coalitions and partnerships, because nothing happens day one on those coalitions and partnerships. You have to sit there sometimes for years to find a role. So in this case, for instance, if Sandra, I'm just saying, right, if Sandra is coming and sitting on a table with the community partners, with the social service sector partners, then while they are there and they understand the dynamic around the table, and they understand the issue, they understand the intricacies, right? So the more the understanding of the social service sector, the more they would have opportunity to provide knowledge, to provide ideas, to facilitate the work towards social innovation. And that way, the integration aspect of things that we're looking forward to, that would definitely take place. So just a few high-level ideas, but I can share more. So this is a perspective from the social services side of things.
Yeah, but I want to hear more. But of course, these kinds of partnerships required academics to be on board and to understand what it is that social sector stakeholders need in these collaborations. Collaborations themselves are really hard. It's hard to build a collaboration because, and this is something that we're hearing, and I don't know what you think of it, but this is something that we hear over and over again. In what social sector organizations want is not punctual, discrete collaborations. What they want is relationships with the campus, things that are going to go beyond the length of a research collaboration. So it has to be a commitment at the institutional level, not at the personal level. That's often what happens, and I think we've heard that in other contexts. It's individual-led. Means that when the individual is no longer interested or no longer there, the collaboration falls apart. So what are the structures? Like, what kind of structures, what kind of programming, what kind of opportunities can establish a layer of collaborations between campuses and their communities? How do we, and this is something that I would like to hear from anyone, and from both Andrea maybe and Abid especially. So in academia, we have an understanding of expertise that's intimately tied to our specialty. So, and unfortunately, I am a historian of logic in the 19th century, which means that I have no relevance whatsoever to any of these things. But is that so? And you have again super specialization in sociology, in anthropology, but there's also broad disciplinary know-how that has to do with research method, the capacity to evaluate a problem from a critical perspective. And I'm sure we all need evidence. We all need the expertise that's linked to the knowledge that goes to the facts. But what kind of use could we make of this broad disciplinary know-how that's available and completely untapped across the humanities and social sciences? Am I fantasizing in the wrong place?
No. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll just give you my perspective on this. So for us in the social services sector, right, there might be some great research happening at the university level, right? But for us, translating that into action, turning that into program design, that's not our expertise, right? So that's why that consistency in that partnership and that relationship is critical. But again, speaking from my experience, like say 22 years here in Ottawa alone, right? I've never seen a single initiative except the Ottawa Neighbor study that I mentioned, right? So, and that's also just if you Google Ottawa Neighbor study, you'll see it. So it's just a team of students and one staff is supporting it. So that's not technically research that we're talking about. So except that, I haven't seen a single initiative where we had a researcher engaged, or an academic institution for that matter, engaged from the beginning to the program design and development and implementation and evaluation, right? We did submit a proposal to SHRC this time around, and that was exactly the idea, that we'll work on a concept, then we'll implement it, test it, and then we'll evaluate and then readjust. And that proposal was not accepted. And one of the reasons was that we were not, United Way was not a research institution, right? And then I spoke to what's her name?
I know.
Sure. So when I spoke to her, she said, no, we do fund and we recognize United Way as a research partner. So anyway, so the hurdles, right, the institutional hurdles and the culture of the academia on the one hand. So we are open, right? We are open to, but I think we need to come up with some new funding models, right? So the funders or the donors on the academic institution side, they are open to funding these types of initiatives, so that researchers could go and spend time with the community throughout consistently, right? And as you mentioned, on a consistent basis, even if that research is not there, that partnership goes on. And on our end, we should be having conversations with our funders. We are funders with our donors, that we need to invest in these types of initiatives. So go ahead, please.
It's a matter of, I mean, I think there's one simple thing, and I know this is going to sound really self-interested, but academics that I know are busy, and they're busy with their specialty, and they're busy with, they have their learning questions to answer, and generally they're looking back and analyzing and sort of distilling and coming up with, and then arguing and, stating their point and getting their point. And that's just from an outsider's perspective, what I've seen. And nonprofits are busy and they're trying to solve the immediate need. And it's, and so if you were able to actually have the money go to the nonprofits to then ask the academics to do the research, it would change it. Because if you just have the academics who already have their questions and their specialties and there's areas of publishing, they have no vested interest in actually researching what we need to know, right? So I think it's actually a total, even if we just did a little bit as a test to see what happened.
Ooh, a pilot.
Maybe a pilot.
So I don't even consider myself an academic, but somehow I have a PhD and I work at a research center. So I'm probably getting closer back to academia after many years out. Look, I think we have a whole system that is not geared towards thinking about solutions, at least in the social sciences, humanities. When I went through my PhD, we understood problems. And you ended your paper or your thesis or whatever with further research questions. Not interventions to test, not solutions, further research questions. That's how you end. And I think that's maybe a little different than some other areas, other maybe physical sciences. And I think that's a culture issue in academia that we have to address.
I would also like to I mean, it would sound self-interested, but it's not at all. So basically, there was a piece of research done by the Bertelsmann Stiftung in Germany. They advise or they provide thinking for the Germany's innovation strategy, especially approaching the societal challenges in Germany. So very much aligned with Horizon Europe and the societal challenges. Germany also is thinking about a similar structure. And they identified one key piece is the support structure. So the support structure to be able to translate different interests, motivations, languages, disciplinary languages with other sectors. And these brokers are really important for innovation to happen. Excelis could be one, but there are tons of other ones to do. I'm thinking about university level led brokers. So they're basically in the international organizations field where I come from, we call them boundary organizations. So you need boundary organizations, institutions, and people that are able to translate different information from one side to the other. You can do that institutionally. You can do that at the university level. Some of the Quebec-based universities have that structure that is the community engagement structure, that basically their whole role is to gather information from the community, try to link them with the right professors or researchers. And then they could also have how do we apply your research? I mean, there are different waves and models, but the support structures and the change agents, as they call them in Germany, could be a really interesting piece for that.
Yeah, there are. So we often talk about the fact that there's a lack of incentives for researchers to engage in knowledge mobilization activities that engage the community. But it's not just a matter of incentives, it's also a matter of support. And whether we go for the brokering model or for the collaborative model, supporting collaborations is incredibly important. That also requires some form of maybe not physical infrastructure, but definitely some support. And we definitely need to start thinking about what it looks like. At this point, we've been talking, and maybe, I don't know if Tricia, you'd like to, technically, you should be our last.
Oh, I've said a lot. It's all good. Let's open it up to the room.
So why don't I give my microphone to, and if you have a question, please just raise your hand. So if you raise your hand up at the back. And I would like you to introduce yourself so that we know who you are.
Hi. Check. Is this on yet? Yeah. It is? Okay. I'm Adam Sardi. I'm from St. Mary's University in Halifax, where I run the research office. I'm a physicist and not a social scientist, but by virtue of running the research office, I've had the pleasure of overseeing a provincial network that's based on action research and community engaged research. And I just want to say a little bit about the model we use, because it sounded almost exactly like what Andrea and Abid just described. We have a model where the ideas for research are generated by our community groups and our not-for-profits. And once we have those groups telling us what they need, then what we do with an individual who spends a lot of time talking to build network, which is the infrastructure that Sandra talked about. That infrastructure is the time of a person. Talking to researchers across our network of 7 universities to find people that are potentially interested in the research that's needed by the not-for-profit group. And then there's lots of discussions and fast dates and try to make the connection. And then we give them a little bit of money from our province, about $7,500, to carry it out, usually involving a student, often an undergraduate student, because we're a bunch of small universities and a community college. Over 3 years, we funded about 70 projects at $7,500 each. 75% of that's gone to pay students to do the research in areas going from art support for trauma victims to Elizabeth Fry's society, work with women in prisons, to housing, you name it, but it follows the model that you wanted. The ideas come from the not-for-profits. Our work is to convince faculty members that might be interested to partner with them to answer those questions. And then the investment is building the network of all of those interested faculty members across the whole province, so that when new ideas come up, we have a network to go to, and we keep that network connected through lots of conversations and workshops with the not-for-profits. So the real work is the talking. And so what we need is the money to hire people. And right now, that's hard to get. We had it from the province. It'll eventually run out.
The Action Research Network model is emerging as best practices comes up. When we're looking, we're currently doing a scan of community-focused knowledge mobilization initiatives across Canada, and I'm excited to be able to learn more about what could turn out to be one of our case studies, because there's definitely something there. And when we talk, for people who come from the STEM, and I don't know how many of you come from the STEM sector, or if everyone is so I don't know what you're going to think about this, but so what Adam described, it's very, very laborious. I mean, it takes time. And when you tell someone who hasn't experienced the necessity of building trust with a community partner to get the project going, and that happens a lot in the tech sector, because it's easy to build a relationship when there's going to be money at the end. In the social sector, it's about confidence, trust. There's a lot of confidence that needs to be, because we're dealing with vulnerable population. It's not a luxury. It's not losing time. This is absolutely necessary part of the process. And I think that calling it infrastructure would be is also not misleading at all. It's part of what needs to be there for anything to arise in the first place.
If I can say one quick follow-up. Everything I just described was based on the model from our tech transfer office. So everything we did is exactly what we have to do now to convince our STEM researchers to stop doing the questions they want to do and start doing what our industry partner wants to do. And by doing that at my own little university, we've increased our contracts and partnerships by threefold in terms of dollars over 5 years, because we stopped having people just apply to NSERC and started getting partnership and other kinds of money.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other question?
Can I just go first and then me?
Well, thank you. Absolutely. So that's what we're trying to do. And what you're brushing on here as well is the way to do non-tech transfer as well. So what is the innovation process when it's not a technology? So it's basically talking with a human or a group of humans saying, oh, I have this idea. Is it applicable to your field or to your organization, to your community? Yes, no, what would we need to tweak? And then you test it a bit. So this is basically the same process, and this needs to be included in the innovation strategies that we put forward, because if not, it's only prototyping, going up the TRLs, the technological readiness levels. But when you don't have a tech, how do you do it? And I think it's the humans and the iterative process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the testing, right? I just want to add, one of the challenges, and I love this, and I'm going to definitely call you and it would be good to get a case study around it.
He's going to be part of our partnership.
Okay, good. Because one of the challenges is those community organizations and individuals that are coming to the table, they don't get paid any overhead. And it's really at a huge cost to them to spend that much time. And it's really difficult. And you're thinking like, oh, women coming out of jail aren't thriving. That's only worth $7,500 in an undergrad student. I mean, that's tragic, right? Whereas an app that's going to brush your teeth for you and tell you when to brush your teeth is worth hundreds of thousands. Like, we need to kind of shift our priorities a little bit, right? Just saying.
thank you very much for the discussion. My name is Caroline Telcalva. I'm from Genome Quebec, and part of the genomic enterprise at large. Just to give you a bit of context, most of our program, or if not all of them, we fund social research into our project to better or increase the chance of success of the project, the technologies, but also their implementation, but also the information that goes into the design. So we fund what we call GELS researchers, so genomics and their economical, environmental, legal, and social aspect. But getting genomics researchers and GELS researchers together and having a discussion and getting input into the design of the project, something really, really difficult to do. So would you have some pointers how we could increase our chances of having these impactful relationship? Because we see, I don't have the stats, we don't have the stat, but we find that better integrated gels into our projects have it's impactful or have bigger impact on the communities.
Seems like a great time to talk about skills. Just seeing as how I come from the Future Skills Center, and I'll let other colleagues weigh in, but I mean, like, we have seen time and time again of how important like collaboration, problem solving, relational, interpersonal skills are. And just for any university professors out there, assign group work, make people work but together. These are the things that researchers need to learn, is how to build those collaborative relationships.
Yeah, because they don't actually speak the same language, so it's really hard. But when there was someone that we spoke to this week, he said, well, when it clicks, it's something amazing. It's like an epiphany that goes on. But it's hard because we can put two people in the same room, but it doesn't mean it's going to click or they're going to they see eye to eye. So it's, just increase the chance that those epiphanies happen,
Mm-hmm.
So
there's, go ahead. Sorry, I keep interrupting. You go ahead.
So yes, skills. There's and this is something that we're really interested in at the collaborative, right? So it's creating genuinely fruitful collaborations across sector or interdisciplinary, and so building the skills in emerging researchers as part of experiential learning, that's something that we're doing now. We're hoping to do at a scale to looking for the future. How do you do it now? Working with scholars who have not received that training, who have never been told that collaboration is important, who conceive of their discipline as something that needs to be isolated. And it's a challenge. It is a challenge. And I think that Tricia is absolutely right. You need the skills to be able to do that. I'm not sure upskilling at that point is researchers of my vintage is the right approach. But definitely that's where there's also a need for infrastructure. Again, for these collaborations, it needs to be incentivized. If you're going to enter in a collaboration, some people see a lot of disadvantages to doing that. So there might be some, but the Tri-Council is helping. And I know, what Genome Canada is doing, you're doing all the right things and trying to find a solution. So
can I just add one thing? With social innovation, I think about it in terms of there's research, there's facilitation, there's evaluation. And so I think what you're talking about is something that needs to be facilitated. And we actually were about to launch something called Social Innovation Unlocked. It'll come out in December, and it's a crowdsourced free resource for over 50 different processes you can go through that are facilitation tools and frameworks. And you can sort of search which kind you want and what you want to do. But I think you need to facilitate that, because we know that if you just get people that are thinking the same things, then it's easy, but you don't get a lot of new stuff out of that.
But it doesn't foster innovation otherwise. And if you're interested, or anybody else in the room is interested, Genome Canada has a knowledge mobilization or translation opportunity that's actually out, and registration and are going to be open until December. And there's a info session also next week. So if anyone's interested, there on the website, or let us know. Thank you.
Do you want to? So, Coriel, do you want to add something while we transition to?
Yeah, sure. It was, I mean, architecture and design can provide some answers, perhaps. So, placemaking is really important. It sounds like you already have a place. Support structures, yes, it sounds like you are already a support structure. Perhaps the incentives now. If you look at, again, I'm still looking into Europe, but the Eureka process, what they basically do is they put people in a room with a carrot, and then they just say self-assemble. This is our objective. Here's a carrot. Now see who wants to work together.
But better food than a carrot.
Yes, well, yes. Caviar, vegan caviar. But perhaps think about the incentives and give it time as well.
All right. So we have one question here and then hopefully time for another one.
Hi, I remember you asking if someone here is in the room from Shirk. I'm not, but I'm from ISED, so I'll take that. Mark Shimelda, work in knowledge mobilization, but I come from a college background where social innovation is baked into the DNA, so huge fan of this space. One of the projects we're doing in the short term is designing a new national lab-to-market program that was announced in Budget 2022, and definitely looking in this design phase to bake in social innovation as one of the possibilities or streams that students and researchers can be supported in that. So from your perspective, what is the lab and what is the market in social innovation? It's going to be very different from other kinds of innovation. And in particular, what challenges do students face in terms of establishing impact outside the institution? And that goes a lot to Abid's point about needing to bring in researchers from outside the institution and into the partner, into the community. And definitely would like to keep talking with you after this chat. So.
Do you want to say something?
Sure. I won't talk about us. I'll talk about the feedback. As I was telling you, we were a year old in this. So we had to come up with a process to engage with universities and with societal stakeholders that are benefiting from this. One of the things that lab to market, again, very lab, starting from knowledge, going to society. One of the things that in the social innovation, because I rarely talk about social innovation, I try to move away from social innovation to talk about process innovation and not only dedicated to social benefits, but it's a social process, but it's not necessarily social innovation. One of the things that have emerged from universities is they said, we want to engage with a partner. It's already asked at the grant level. When we go to Shirk, they ask, how will you transfer your knowledge or how will you mobilize knowledge? We might come up with a few partners because we know that we asked them to put their name on our research grant, but then we don't know what to do. Yeah. And we don't know how to approach a conversation. Could you help us? Could you help us structure a conversation? A bit to your point earlier, who can help us have a meaningful conversation with a partner? And this is something that we're thinking about in our next service offering to say, can we help upstream before the actual research grant gets done? Just help in discussing with. Shirk has some good financing for that. I mean, the Connection program, they had that vision that, yes, you can put some funding to discuss with a partner, allocate some of that funding to the partner, but because sometimes nonprofits, they don't have funding. And it's too costly for them to put someone to co-design a research project. It's too costly for them. So do allocate some of that funding to go to a partner. But again, how do you broker that conversation? And thinking about that might be a good idea.
And that lab to market. So in the social sector and including social science and social science and humanities researchers, what's the lab like? And I think that's probably the wrong way to think of it, because and I'm seeing a red thing that's telling me we need to finish soon. But the production of new knowledge in the social science and humanities is not designed to inform social innovation. What the contribution, and I don't know, down the line it will. When it becomes common sense, as it always does, then that's innovation that's absorbed. But what we're thinking about and there's a lot of data and evidence that needs to be there. But I would want to say that there's no lab in social innovation. The researcher is already in the community working with the partner and doing all these things with co-design. But Andrea is saying, no, I'm wrong.
I think we actually, we did do some ecosystem mapping, and there were about 300 social innovation labs across the country.
But they are not. They're not in the universities, are they?
Some of them are.
Okay.
But not all of them. There's living labs, there's innovation labs, there's a number of them. And this was done in 2018. There was 350, and we're just redoing it now with the help of MyTax. And I think that would be a place to look. There's skills labs. And then how to have them work better with the universities if they're not already is really key. That's when we need to start talking. And colleges as well. So if they're not in the universities, they should be. Right. But Radius is a good example, and refugee livelihoods labs. So, yeah.
City Labs also.
City Labs. And we need more, I would say.
All right. Do we have time for one last question, or do we free the people to go for drinks? Are you? Oh, you're for sure. Okay. We need to take that question.
Thank you so much. This was a great session. I think I have 10 pages of notes, and would have so much to say about the whole subject. I think it was a great session. If you look at the partnership suite funding opportunities that we have at SSHRC, we have 4 standard ones. And you think that does not support the model of the type of work you want to do, write to us, get together, write us a 2-pager. We'll get back to you and try to work with you and try to improve, because this is exactly what we're trying to support. The gentleman over there talked about St. Mary's University, the type of project they're doing. The partnership engagement grant at SSHRC is exactly to support these kinds of activities. Now, it's not that much money. It's $25,000 over a year. The intake for the last competition is super low. So low that we're going to fund 100% of the recommended project under that competition. So there's a bit of an intake issue there. So, yeah. Well, there's 4 competitions. There's 4 competitions a year. So look it up. Somebody else talked about SSHRC supporting these engagement activities like connection grants, the PEG partnership engagement grant, even the partnership development grant is there to support innovative idea, risk-taking research. If we're not doing it, we want to hear about it. We heard about the project not being funded. I mean, we have a problem that perhaps our sister agencies don't have, is a low success rate. We cannot fund everything that comes through the door, and we have to make some very tough decision when the project comes. So that's my sell pitch for SSHRC, but I found the session super interesting today about the impact. I came here because I thought, finally, we're gonna get serious about talking of the impact of social sciences and humanities. A lot of this has to do with how we define the impacts we're having out there. Our challenge in social sciences and humanities is that the impact, we only find out about the impact on the long term. It's a consensus of the research community. It's all the work. For instance, in the 80s and the 90s, we saw a spike in our research community putting interest into aging and stuff. Canada today has, our pension system in Canada is among the best in the world. And somehow, some way, somebody has to make a link with all that research that happened in the 80s and the 90s, right? That's one challenge we have. The second one is that no researcher in social sciences and humanities, they're so humble. They'll never claim that their research has led to this policy change or change of, they're so humble that we keep on asking them, what was the impact? And sometimes they'll tell us, well, I was involved in that commission from the government. We wrote the report. We had the recommendation and something came out of it. But that's not because of me, it's because of the whole research community. They're so humble about it. So a lot has to do of how we define impact. And when when I talk to researchers that are thinking of partnership and they're struggling with this idea of impact and how to monitor the results of their research and all this, I always tell them, well, first think about the partners that are involved in your partnership. What kind of impact you're going to have for these folks? Yeah. And don't talk about changing the world or changing national policy, because there's so many factors that come in. So, think of, how you define impact is important. If we want to demonstrate impacts of social sciences and humanities, we have to go back and see what was done in the 80s and the 90s and how it changed and positioned Canada in the world and all this. And, globally speaking, I think in terms of social development in Canada, we're doing relatively good when we compare ourselves. There's lots of issues that need to be addressed. But a lot has to do with all the social sciences and humanities research that has occurred. So anyway, I'll leave it to this. I have so much to say. I have like 10 pages of notes. Thank you very much.
I'm not going to say anything about the humility of humanists because I might contradict you. But I'm a humanist. So I think that we can, and there's not really any answer. I would want to think more about impact, and I think we're very conscious of the fact and understanding how impact works in the innovation ecosystem is sort of part of the especially when it comes to social science and humanities. But we're done for today, and I want to really thank very heartily my awesome panelists, and I'm buying you a drink at the reception. And I want to thank you for being here, and I hope that we can continue these discussions for as long as you know where to find us, right?